Good morning, everybody. This is Carl for Today in Tokyo. Maybe I should stop saying Carl for Today in Tokyo. It sounds like I work for a news agency or for some social media broadcasting organization, and I don't. Maybe I should just say this is Carl. You know, many of you have probably seen there have been hundreds of iterations of my online branding or my profiles on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, wherever else. And it's always because I've been trying to balance a sense of promotion for my work and a sense of honesty for who I am, to give people an understanding if we get in a discussion. And these profiles always change. And this morning I woke up, another indication we don't have free will, with the idea in mind that I just want to be me. And this has been a concept that has been passing through everything that I've done online. You know, from trying to say that I'm an artist or a writer or a poet or a guy who goes like this, to saying that I'm a teacher and I should brand myself as a teacher so I can get more work, so I can survive well, right? And the philosophies come and go about how to do that, you know. And today I just settled again with just wanting to be me. And then, you know, I don't need a whole bunch of buzz business words to get students. I just need to say, you know, eikaiwa in Japanese and ESL in English, and that should be enough for someone to investigate me if they like what they see from my content, right? Too often I try to make my profile about, you know, here's the whole story in one shot, and that's what makes people engage in pressured speech and talk too much instead of being calm and relaxed and just waiting for other people to care enough to investigate, right? Anyway, I didn't want to talk about business, but I thought I would mention that's why my profile is going back to just plain me, right? And I think my current picture has a mask on because I want to promote people wearing masks and covering their faces. And there's a philosophical statement on the mask about our rights because, you know, in America and in some other places, people confuse their rights with their right to be in a group and not affect other people in an adverse way. I think all of these things are important, you know. Self-expression, honesty, honest self-expression, being involved in the national debate is important, or the international discussion. And that is something that often makes me wonder why I'm in Japan. And many of you have heard me say that I'm in Japan because I came here interested in Japanese woodblock prints, Zen, good infrastructure, a peaceful society. But everything we do in life involves compromises. And some of the most basic intrinsic things that I think are important are compromised by my being in Japan. And so I question myself every day about why I'm still here. And of course, those questions come more readily when you're struggling. And I've been struggling since I got to Japan, right? Another reason that I came to Japan was to teach English, which is a much more comfortable way of making a living than doing some of the other things that I've done in America. Maybe with the exception of when I was a draftsman. That was really interesting, to be working with engineers and drawing machines and things. But I like helping people. I have a good command of the English language. I speak without an accent unless I want to speak with an accent. I can do voices. I'm entertaining, people say. I'm fairly knowledgeable. I'm knowledgeable about my language insofar as whatever question they ever ask me about grammar and style, and so on and so forth. And the idea used to be you could make a good living doing this. But the compromises that you have to make to be an English teacher in Asia, from the point of view of a thinking Western person who believes in full democracy and equality, are great. For example, you have to put your picture in your applications, which necessarily means that there's someone in the company that's going to hire you who's judging your looks before judging your ability. How do I know that? They wouldn't ask for the picture. They would only ask for the information about you, and if the information about you indicated that you were worthy of investigation for the job, then they would ask to see what you look like, and they wouldn't even ask if they were westernized, because we all frown on doing that, right? we all believe in going deeper into what life is about, and it's not about this unless you're a movie actor or a model, right? In every other situation, this should not matter, right? But over here it does. It used to bother me in Korea too, that in my last few years, they didn't just want your picture, they wanted to know how old you were, right? If you can get to the job and do the work, it shouldn't matter how old you are, right? But of course, in countries where they retire people early so they can fill the job market with younger people, that becomes an issue. And over here, well, let's just say you really can't argue against it. If you're asking for pictures in resumes and job applications, you're prejudiced. You're prejudiced about how people look, right? And there will be all kinds of BS about justifying it, like, well, we have to present a certain kind of friendly look or a certain kind of appearance to our customers. It's all prejudice. It's all prejudging, and it's prejudging based on something extremely shallow, right? And that's just a fact. And one of the things that often bothers me about that is the United States and our taxes defend this part of the world, but we're defending parts of the world that still engage in not just ageism and appearanceism, they're also sexist, hugely sexist in this part of the world, right? So these are things that make me feel like I'm compromising my principles all the time. I can't vote in a foreign country, right? That's debatable as to whether I should be able to if I've only been there a short time and don't know anything about the culture. But in the culture that I'm in particular, the people will admit to you that most of them don't engage in politics. Now, someone who knows about Asia more than the average person who doesn't would say, well, they're also probably being polite. That's a euphemism for lying, which means that they are caring about politics, but they're not going to tell you the truth about it. That's another thing that you have to deal with when you live in this part of the world. It's a lot less straightforward, right? So I'm not here to criticize Japan, I'm criticizing myself. And if you're smart, or you think, or both, you understand how I'm criticizing myself right now. I'm not criticizing Japan. I'm talking about, now I'll spell it out for you, for those of you who are still scratching your heads, of which there are probably very few. I'm talking about how we compromise our principles to accomplish things in life, right? But when you get to my age, it's a little bit late for making grandiose decisions and jumping from thing to thing, like I used to when I was young, which is why I stay here and I suffer, hoping that things will improve and get better. But it's been very rough, and people should really look before they leap, before they go live in another place, right? Yes, it's safer here. Yes, the infrastructure is much better than in America, and I don't have to own a car, and I don't have to have a big carbon footprint, right? But transportation's expensive because there's no consolidated transportation system. You go from train to train to train to go anywhere significant, right? It's extremely noisy. My upstairs neighbor or housemate is putting his recycling in the front of the house, and everything is so small here that you hear everything that everybody's doing, right? So whether or not I want to wake up at 6:30 in the morning, I hear all the neighbors walking by because they talk really loud, right? So that's another thing. Things are rarely what they appear to be. They're rarely what they appear to be in any situation, in any country, right? So people come to Japan because they think it's all peaceful. It's the noisiest country in the world, according to some surveys. Who would have thought? I wouldn't have, right? And I've been complaining about it for a long time, and then I just looked it up on the internet yesterday, and that's what some research has found. It's the noisiest country in the world, right? Guys like me talking all the time, making videos. Every train station you go to has multiple recordings going back to back, and then what's in the recording is being, repeated by the conductor. And then there's the orientation of things, right? So an announcement here is not made like this. Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to say, it's made like this, right? And that's grating against people who come from the West and they don't think that certain forums are appropriate for stylization, right? You can be waiting for a train in Ikebukuro, and the voice will tell you that a train is coming to Shinjuku like this. The next train is arriving for Shinjuku. Why would you want pillow talk with children around? How do you explain that, right? So the music, the constant music everywhere you go, everything rings, everything talks. You open up the laundry machine at the laundromat, it's talking to you. You close it, it's talking to you. The elevator is talking to you. The escalator is talking to you, right? People are talking to you, handing out flyers everywhere. Politicians are going by with loudspeakers. I'm sensitive to sound, if you haven't figured it out by now. One of the reasons I came to Japan was I thought it was going to be quiet, the way Fukuoka seemed to be. I used to visit Fukuoka. But now I'm in the densest city in the world. That's also not wise for a guy who is asthmatic, right? It's also extremely cramped and tight. And when a family gets a new house, a new piece of property here, they raise the house and build a new one. That's why every video I make, in the background, you hear construction. There hasn't been a day I've been living here where I didn't hear construction outside. And with construction, you have guys who smoke on the construction site and talk loud. It has been a cacophonous disaster since I got here. I have to sleep with earplugs. Never had to sleep with earplugs in the hometown I grew up in. Bless my dad and my mom for raising me there. So nothing against the Japanese. It's just extremely different from what you think it is. That's every place. That's every place, right? And so as a guy who's really concerned about civics and rights and virtue and government and so on, I'm often scratching my head looking at what I have to face here, right? Another reason I came to Japan was people are not supposed to smoke and walk here. But on any given day, 6 days out of 10, you're walking down the street, the wind smells like cigarette smoke. I hate cigarettes. Hate. I'm using the word hate here about tobacco because it's the dumbest thing, like brain up your ass dumb, to smoke. It's an immoral thing. Cigarettes, right? Like child porn and genocide. That's where cigarettes belong because they're radioactive. Not to mention giving out every other kind of pollution, burning polymers, plastics, heavy metals, right? So you're necessarily a terrorist when you smoke. Well, you're not a terrorist because you're not trying to prove anything. That's what a terrorist is trying to do, prove something, and he's trying to change social or political situations with violence. But you have to be a sociopath to smoke cigarettes on the planet, not just in your house, on the planet, because what you're doing goes somewhere and it stays there until other people inhale it, days or years later, okay? So I left New York for one reason. I didn't want to inhale that on the street. Well, I have to inhale it here. I have to hold my breath. I have to turn around and go the other way because people break the law. One of the reasons I came to Japan is they have a law that you can't smoke on the street, right? As I said. But very few people follow that law in the neighborhoods because the police don't patrol, and the police do basically nothing in Japan except harass foreigners and bring people into their little police boxes to counsel them and fill out papers when they have a complaint, right? Which is nice that they're there in the neighborhood for you. But that's what I wanted to talk about today, and it all sounded like an aside, and that's okay. We could call this an aside from Carl in Tokyo. See you in Tokyo.